Thank you very much, Representative. Representative Klarides. Of the 114th, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today we've seen and heard a lot of conversation on this subject that I think a lot of us weren't very familiar with when it first came up at the beginning of session. I think it was an education for a lot of people. I certainly learned a lot about it as it proceeded through the process. When we saw the amendment which addressed the CUPPA issue, which is certainly a very technical issue for most people who aren't familiar with it, and I was very happy to see members from both sides of the aisle work on that to make sure that the bill, as most bills we put forth, are written in the proper way and don't have unintended consequences. We also learned that the medical world does not believe that this practice works, which to me was probably the most interesting part, because a lot of times when we come up with issues that we work on in these two chambers and in this building, we have our initial reaction to it, which is usually emotional and based on the limited information we have, because I mean there's a lot of subjects that come up and there's a lot of things we talk about, and we all have a field of expertise, so to speak, but we don't know everything about everything. And so we have our first reaction is, well, I don't think that's a good thing, or I think it's a good thing. And then we sit through our many, many hours of public hearings. We do research, we have our offices do research, and we learn. And we learn if our emotional feeling about it is in line with the actual feeling about it, whether it be the legal field, the medical community, et cetera. And in this situation, we heard from the medical community saying that this is something that they do not agree with and that does not work. But I guess where I fall in regards to this is that we're dealing with kids. Now, every one of us was a kid at one point, believe it or not, and every one of us has gone through a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff and a lot of bad stuff. Now, when some of us were younger, it wasn't necessarily called bullying. But you know it didn't make you feel good. That's what you know. You know how it made you feel right here? Whether it was you were too fat or you were too skinny, you were too tall, you were too short, you weren't popular, you were the wrong color skin, you went to the wrong church, your family didn't live in the right neighborhood, fill in the blank. I think we can all add something to that list. And that's bad enough. That's bad enough. I came home crying many a day for many a reason. Believe it or not, I was very shy growing up. It's a true statement. For a while. I mean, you can ask her sitting back there, she'll tell you. She has to run another term to actually get the name uttered in public. But in all seriousness, those are things, whether we wear the wrong clothes or we have the wrong car or we live in the wrong neighborhood or we're a little heavier or a little skinnier, that's bad enough because we can change those things if we choose. We can change those things if we choose. But what we're talking about today can't be changed. I know that there is a differing of opinion on that. I believe very strongly that we are born the way we are born, with the feelings we have. And the fact that there are people that try to change those feelings that people have makes me sad. It makes me very sad. Now, some of our colleagues today talked about how parents should have the right to do what they choose to do with their children, and I agree with that, for the most part. And that's why the CUTPA part was put in here, and that's why we talked about being paid for this kind of treatment, because it allows a parent to take their children, for example, to their place of worship and speak with their priest or their rabbi etc., if they choose. It allows those conversations to be had, as long as one is not being paid for it. I've heard words today such as barbaric, politically correct. And listen, we live in this world that becomes more politically correct every day. We live in this world that is difficult day in and day out. But when we start comparing human lives, children's lives, to the color of cars, to motorcycles, and I understand the argument, I understand the thought process, but come on, guys. It's hard enough growing up. It's hard enough growing up. I don't care what religion you were born with, what color skin you were born with, how you feel about members of the same sex or the opposite sex. There are things we cannot change about ourselves to conform to what society believes is, and I will say this with quotes, normal. It is not our decision. It is not our choice how people feel about themselves and others in regards to their sexuality. And as many difficult decisions as we have been making and will be making in this building this year, this is one that will allow me to go to sleep tonight, put my head on that pillow and say, you know what? Maybe it's worth this craziness that we call the General Assembly and running for office. Because we are showing that we respect people's feelings. And when we start to try and change that in this way, that will affect them the rest of their lives. That will affect how they treat others. That will affect how they raise their family. That will affect everything about them. We all talk about loving everybody. I don't love everybody. In fact, I dislike a lot of people. I'll be honest. I do. I mean, we do. It's okay. I'm being honest, right? But I respect who they are inside, and I respect their passion for the way they live their lives. That's the difference. That's the difference. And if we are not going to treat children in that way as public policy makers, then why are we here? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam.